Welcome to Signature Required. It is intended for Tennesseans by Tennesseans.
What makes them tick? What lights their fire?
We're pulling forward people that, unless you listen to this interview, you might not know a thing about them. The heart of a Tennessean, the volunteer state, is serve, and we do so largely without self-promotion.
And these are genuine people that get up every day and want to make art, or want to educate the nations, or want to have a heart of love in a way that makes a difference.
Learn from 50 years of experience, take a nugget away, and then go share it with a friend. Kevin Menezes, we're very excited to have you here. Welcome to Signature Required.
Thank you so much, Spencer and Carly. It's just a joy to be here.
You are a dear friend of ours and have been a friend for a decade now. You are a church planter in India. I'm really excited to get to talk to you today to just learn some of your story because having known you as a friend so long, you have a unique bridge between Western culture and Eastern culture. So maybe just get us started and tell us a little bit about your story, where you were born, where you've lived, and we'll kind of just go through it together and let our listeners learn about how impressive your background is.
Now, the first thing that really intrigued me was whether you were captivated by my good looks. But
Clearly, that was part of it.
That's why we have all these cameras around here. This interview doesn't do justice without capturing that.
Yeah.
I was actually born and raised in the northern part of India, in a small town called Allahabad. Now, I know when I say small town, we are talking of 1 million people, okay?
Oh my gosh.
That's a small town for us.
Small
Thank you
town
for the
in
perspective.
In India, yeah. But I grew up there, and all of my childhood, my college education, and after that I moved to the big city, which is Mumbai. So your equivalent here in the States would be New York. Actually, that's the closest city I've ever found in America, similar to Mumbai in a sense. But it's been an interesting journey, and whenever I do travel to the U.S., it's hard to really explain how different our two worlds are in terms of when I have my American friends come and visit in India. The first thing that really strikes them, I mean, apart from the crowd and the people and all of that, it's what I call an assault on the eyes. And that's because of the vibrancy of colors. You know, if you see Indian weddings or Indian people, there's always an array of colors. So people get so captivated by how different it is, just getting used to all those beautiful colors. But I think as a culture and as a people, we have a rich cultural heritage, and I know that you have that too here in the U.S. But
Not like 4,000 years that you all have, though.
Yeah.
yeah, I guess. I mean, it's rich in culture. It's very diverse. I mean, something that's happening now in the U.S. with a lot of migrants moving even to Tennessee. I think the diversity in India is huge. So many languages, food. I mean, the cuisine of every different state. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
So you were born in India, and then you left for a while. Tell us about that.
Yes, like I said, I grew up in North India, then moved to the western part of the country, Mumbai, and then through, I think it was really God preparing me for what He had or would want me to do somewhere down the road. I felt a call to move to the Middle East. And I had never been to the Middle East. I really knew little about it. But I did learn to recognize the voice of God. And when he would speak to me, I knew, I sort of, it's that gentle voice. And over the years, I've learned to recognize the voice of God. And sometimes it's things I don't like to hear. But I've learned to trust and obey God. So when this opportunity came up, it was a job opportunity in Dubai. That's in the United Arab Emirates. And at that time, I was working in Citibank in Mumbai. And most of my friends thought that that's the most bizarre thing to do. Why would you leave an organization like Citibank to move to the Middle East? But it was hard to explain to them that my convictions were not based on a job or a career, but it was based on following God and what he wanted me to do. So lo and behold, I took that step, not really knowing what it would look like. And most of my journey really has been that way, taking a step at a time, sort of not knowing what the next steps would look like. A little like Abraham, when he was told to go to a nation which he didn't even have a clue about. There's oftentimes in my life I've felt that kind of a tension. And so we moved to the Middle East. My son David was at the time only 6 months old. And it was an interesting journey. The first, I went there before my family joined me. And for the first month, I cried several times. And I felt so alone. There was no Christian church. I couldn't find community. And I just wondered, God, why did you bring me here?
Did you question that you had heard correctly in that moment?
I had multiple times I asked God, and I even questioned, did I hear God correctly? Am I sure this is where he wanted me to be? But, I've realized that whenever you take a simple step of faith, God does confirm. And over the period of the initial 6 months, I had several confirmations that God was in it, in that decision. And he led me, and then my family joined me. And it was, I would say, we lived in the Middle East. We lived in Dubai for approximately 10 years. And looking back now, it was a very rich season. I got to learn about culture and nations and people. I led a small group that met in my home, and we had probably 15 different nationalities that met, and I did Bible studies with them, and it was so rich. And through our time there, God also enabled me to help some church plants in very hostile and restricted nations.
And that's really how the church started, right? Is a lot of house churches.
Yeah.
It was not what we've become used to here in America, where, especially in Tennessee, where every 300 yards there seems to be a church very clearly marked, that it's much more a community of families coming and oftentimes doing so quite secretly.
Yeah, and it was, you're absolutely correct. It seemed like I was living the Bible in the book of Acts, where we met house to house. Because when I started to look for a church, I the obvious thing, and I'm talking about more than 25 years ago. So I went to the yellow pages. You know what that yellow pages are? Okay. So I went to look for the yellow pages, and there's no church listed there. And then there was a number I found, and I actually called that number. And it happened to be an American missionary serving there. And he was very warm in the way he welcomed that conversation. And then he invited me. He says, "Why don't you join?" And the church service used to be held on Fridays. That used to be the holiday, and it's because it's a Islamic nation. So on Friday I went, and we were actually meeting in his house. There wasn't any church buildings, but it was such an interesting season. So when I started having meetings in my home, I felt, okay, that's the normal thing to do. Yeah.
What ultimately brought you to the States?
So that season in Dubai, I did get connected with the ministry I serve with now. It's called Every Nation. And we are a global family of churches in over 82 nations as of now, with a heart for church planting and campus ministry. And while I served on the pastoral team and helped start a lot of churches there and disciple a lot of people from different nations, because we were a church planting movement, I felt our leaders always were looking out and praying for people, praying for nations where we didn't have a church or an every nation church. And I remember coming to the States for the first time in 2001. So we would have these conferences that would be held every few years. We would call it a world conference. And it was held in Los Angeles, and I happened to attend that conference. And I was the only Indian there. It was a bit of a strange feeling in that conference, yeah. I was the only Indian there, and a lot of the leaders, I don't think they were being manipulative in any way, but they would be praying for me. And do you ever see yourself going back to your own nation? And honestly, at that point of time, I never felt a call to return back. We were happy serving in the Middle East and obeying what we believe God had called us to do. But then subsequently in 2002, we were at a conference in Manila. And at that conference, I heard the voice again, one more time saying, I want you to return to India. And it's something, Spencer, I really did not want to hear.
Yeah.
And I tried to shake off the thought or the feeling, but the good news was that both Lynette, my wife Lynette, and I, she heard it as well, and later she did confess that oftentimes she knew that we would be going back, but it's something that she would wrestle with.
It just wasn't time for her to tell you.
Yeah, didn't want to ever talk about it, or let's not address that elephant in the room.
Strategic woman.
But long story short, we did that night dedicate ourselves and say, God, whatever you'd want us to do, we would do it, and we would go. And because the headquarters of our Every Nation movement is here in Tennessee, in Nashville, we actually in Brentwood, we were invited to come here and go through pastor school and training. So that brought us to Tennessee, and we absolutely loved the South and the number of friends. I wish I met you in those years, but 10 years is great, and I think we'll be friends forever. But we did enjoy a great season here, and then after our time here, we spent a season in living in the Philippines, and then we were back in Tennessee, and eventually it was from here that we left at the end of 2024. So we reached India actually in the new year of 2005 to start our work there.
Wow. So you've been in India church planting for 20 years.
As of now, yes, almost, yes.
And something I really appreciate about your ministry is how strategic your model is, that you are working to develop youthful leaders on college campuses. Can you give us a little taste of what that looks like for you guys?
You know, when I was here in training now, one of the things that every nation does very intentionally is to reach the next generation of leaders. And the question we would always ask is, where is that next generation? And they are on the college campuses today. So that literally drives where we would go. So whether there's any city in the world that we would plant a church, we would be intentional about targeting a college campus or being somewhere around students. So when I went back to Mumbai, there are 300 colleges in the city of Mumbai.
300 colleges.
300, yeah. And they all fall under the umbrella of the Mumbai University. So I started to pray, God, where do I start even in 300? And it's always good to start right at the top. So I listed down, I did the research, okay, which are the top campuses and, you know, the best courses and all of that. And then that's how we started. I approached those colleges, I talked to the deans, and I really feel it was not anything with my good looks or my charisma or anything like that.
You sure?
Yeah,
okay.
pretty convinced.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain about that.
Okay.
It was really the grace of God that enabled me, because, listen, we're talking about a Hindu nation. It's not Christian colleges. It's not. These are secular colleges, but they did have me in. Now, obviously, I didn't go in as a pastor. I went in as a corporate executive, somebody who could impart on leadership to them. But it gave me an avenue to engage and train and reach out to future leaders.
I learned from you about some important demographics of India that when I saw the numbers, I just couldn't fully absorb it until I sat down to really appreciate them. I just want to give a couple of those and lead it into my question. I remember you telling me that right now in India, there are 1.45 billion people that live there. So 1,450,000,000. And when you compare that to the United States, like our whole population in the United States is about 330 million-ish. So we're talking about a nation that is almost 5 times larger than the United States. And of your 1.45 billion people, 700 million of them are under 25 years old, which is just impossible to fully appreciate how young that society is. I mean, that is right on the cusp of starting to have kids. So India, while having just recently replaced China as the most populous nation in the world, is going to get a whole lot more populated in the near future. So maybe you can just take a second and help the overwhelming majority of the listeners here that have never been to India, may never get the opportunity to go to India. What is it like in India right now, just in general? What's the spirit of the nation? Someone might ask that about the United States, and each of us could tell you a little bit about that. But what's the spirit of India right now? And also answer that as it relates to being a Christian in India. Help us understand what type of minority you are if you're a Christian in India.
Well, that's really a great question, Spencer. And it's true that we are the largest nation. We did overtake China in 2024. And it's also true that we have a young population that's 700 million. So approximately 50% of our population is under the age of 25. And I think for us as a nation, that's exciting. It's exciting on two levels. Obviously, economically, there's going to be a great workforce of young Indians, and you already know this. I mean, India is at the forefront of tech, medical. I mean, I think the largest number of doctors here in the US are Indian.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all of the top tech companies that be filled with Indians. So I think we are poised for just tremendous economic growth, and I think India would be a force to reckon with in that sense. But it's very strategic missionally as well. Like I said that, Christian research has shown that 9 out of 10 people actually come to Christ before the age of 25. And after the age of 25, it's 1 in 10,000. So for us, I mean, that excites me. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, you've got to get to them now. Yeah, it's like if you're going to come to Christ, 9 out of 10 people, that has to happen before they turn 25, or else the odds switch to 1 in 10,000. That really speaks to that 700 million population under 25 in India right now.
Yeah, but like you asked, what's it like and the demographic for Christians, the numbers don't look good, but it's not always about the numbers. Right now, 80% of our nation is Hindu, 15% is Muslim, and Christians are only 2.5%. So while the numbers don't look good and, you might feel a little discouraged, but come on, we've got to look at it as an opportunity. And here's what drives me. If you know and understand Hinduism, which is the largest group, 80% of our population, there is a very complex caste system, but the highest caste and the priestly caste are Brahmins.
That's their name.
Yeah, that's the people group, the Brahmins. And the Brahmins are only 2%. And that 2% influences the 80% of the rest of the Hindus. So my question is to myself, why can't 2% of the Christians begin to influence our nation? And I'm so excited about that fact that, yes, we can influence. It's not always about, the numbers. Jesus, with 12 disciples, could turn the world upside down. So why can it not happen? That drives me. I mean, it excites me, the great opportunity there is in our nation.
Can you contrast when we talk about church planting? Help explain what church planting is like in India versus church planting here in the States. So we go to a church where they're planting churches in cities all over the place, and it is common, even in the United States, trying to reach to a meaningful group of unchurched individuals. Help contrast that in India of actually how you plant a church. Are you allowed to? Is that legal? What is that like when you're trying to grow the faith there?
Now, for us, it's very urban. because we are trying to reach future leaders. So we will obviously hit larger cities. We will hit the top college campuses. So we are very intentional about how we do it. But that doesn't mean that other church models are not effective. Some people have a call to rural ministry, and they would just plant in villages. If persecution intensifies and things become difficult, we could always move to a house church model, how it was in early biblical times. So I think we've got to really discern what God wants and what He's doing in a particular city. So typically when we plant a church, we would scout the land. We would send forth a team there to prayer walk, to have lots of conversations, to engage that city, understand what God is doing, and then figure out what kind of a church He would have us move into plant. And I'm sure it's similar in the U.S. If you're planting in a small community, or if it's a mega church that's starting another campus, then you just move 500 people to that campus, and then you already have a church up and running. And then depending on whether you want to grow your church through outreaches or however else, that continues.
Yeah. Something that's burdened my heart as we love you and your family so much. And in full transparency, Kevin's been such a good friend to us and has spoken such life into our girls. We are worried about you. And I know you're fearless and you're like, we will not be stopped. The church grows under persecution. Just look at the Bible. That's honestly how it grows best. But as people who love you, sitting here in Tennessee, and we look at the news about how your government is treating Christians, can you speak to that a little bit to help maybe educate our audience on what is going on in the political realm for you?
That's a great question, Carly. And you remember, as I said a little earlier, when God took me to the Middle East, I fully didn't understand the purpose behind that. But I think He was preparing me those 10 years that when I would come back to India, I would have an understanding of how to navigate these kind of situations. Now, obviously, when we moved back to India in 2005, it wasn't as challenging in terms of tolerance towards minority groups or Christians and others. Sadly, that has intensified in the last decade. But, I truly believe that God is sovereign, and, He has the ability not only to protect us, but to watch over His people. And the Bible does command us to pray for those in government and to pray for them and to bless them. And we've seen some radical shifts, even in this election that recently concluded, though we have the same party that have won. But there's a lot of dynamic that has changed in that. And so I'm pretty hopeful for a better tomorrow. And I know that God loves people. He died for people. And having 1.4 billion people in my nation tells me that truly, as the scripture says, the harvest is plentiful. And I know the laborers are few, but we've got to keep moving ahead. And I think sometimes just having that little tension just behind us keeps us on the move. We don't ever get complacent, or it's exciting. I to say the least, it's exciting. Now I know it's it's different here in the US, and you do have a lot of freedom and privileges, and it's wonderful. And I've been to a lot of nations that have been restrictive, and not that I am wishing that persecution increases in our nation, but whatever it is, I know that if persecution increases, the spread of the gospel is also going to increase. I have no doubt about that.
What's the importance of an organization like Every Nation in your mission? As I see it, you could go and plant these churches, and you're on the ground there. So for someone that's listening that may try to think through what's the value of Every Nation, what do they do for you? How would you answer that question versus if you just had to do it on your own?
That's a great question, and yes, we could do it alone, but when I look at the Bible, Jesus could have also done it alone, but he did choose 12 disciples who he empowered, and then we see from scriptures it was not just the 12, then it became the 72, and then it was the 120, and that continued to grow. The value that Every Nation adds to us is first of all relational. There are times, and why I say that that's so important is how much I value the relationship I have with you guys for the last decade. I know every time, we talk occasionally, whenever I message you, there's always a response, praying for you, encouraging. And we need that. I need people like you. I value those relationships in Every Nation as well. It keeps us on mission. They also provide a lot of collaborative learning, research and development, like this book, the Purple Book, that I do almost every year. It's one of our most foundational resources. It's been written by two of the founders of Every Nation, Rice Brooks and Steve Morrell, and both of them live here in Nashville. And it's so in terms of resources and development and training, they provide a global resource for us in development. Now imagine if I have to go plant churches as well as develop stuff. It's hard to do it all alone. It's far better to walk together with leaders who we've walked with for several years, and I find it just a great help.
You said in your story, and I just can't get it out of my brain, that you heard the voice of God and that it moved so many of your steps. And that might be something that we share, but we have an audience with a diverse background. And so for people that maybe aren't Christian, or the idea of hearing from God audibly feels super foreign, but they're still trying to make huge life decisions and honor what they feel inside of them, how would you counsel someone? And I know this could be like a 10-part sermon series, so that's not what I'm looking for. How would you explain that experience, or how would you counsel someone that's so far outside their faith journey, but they are seeking wisdom in a decision to even begin to say, okay, God, well, I'm sitting here and I don't know what to do, so help me figure that out?
Kali, that's really a great question, and one of the things I deeply believe is that everybody is created, as the Bible says, in the image of God. And Christian or not, there's something that God puts inside of us that, first of all, brings up a desire to know God. And that's why there are so many expressions of worship. Now, people are trying to figure that out, and like in India and Hinduism, there are 330 million gods, and they're
So there's
all
like as many gods as there are
trying.
people in our country.
Yeah, in a sense. But it's that something that God puts in us that calls for men to seek Him. And in Romans it talks about that. But more than that, even if people know the truth or not, or know the scriptures or not, we all have a conscience. And people can rely on that. They know that there's something deep inside when they seek the Creator, or a lot of people say the force, or I can't explain, but they know there's something greater. That, and they find either peace or solace, or they search for that when they need wisdom on next steps in their life, and they just reach out to the unknown, in a sense, and that directs the course of their life. And it's like, I'm reminded of this passage in the Bible where, Paul was in this place, and, he saw a shrine to an unknown God, and he says, and he used that as a point to say, okay, what you don't know, let me now explain to you. So it does give, obviously, somebody like me an opportunity to engage people and point that in that direction.
We really love having you, Kevin. It's just a treat to hear you as a storyteller, to have a really unique person that can bridge, having lived in Tennessee, right? Because that's one of the spirits of Signature Required, is there's a lot of people moving to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Now, you moved to India from Tennessee, but a lot of people that are coming here that just want to understand what Tennessee is all about. And you carry some of those stripes, and you carry those on the world stage, bringing the Lord to other nations. And it's just really special, I think, for people to be able to hear you speak with a Western mindset, that you've lived here, you can make jokes about road rage and say, hey, you want to see some road rage, come to Mumbai.
There's nobody around you on this road. Why are you even angry?
And it's just so fun to get to ask you about your experience, because you really do share some of our world and some of a world that's a long ways away. So maybe let's bring it home with this, Kevin. So when you think about the mission work that you do in India, that is separate from church planting, but the real way that you are the hands and feet of Jesus with some of the people that you work with there, can you tell us a story, tell us a mission, something that is on your heart of the people group or a community that you serve in India that might just help broaden your story out from more than just church planting?
When we moved to India, it's almost 20 years now, I was very focused on the mission to plant churches and to reach future leaders of our nation, and very intentional about the campus. But as I would drive in our city, now we are a mega city of the world, over 20 million people in Mumbai. But more than half of our population live in slums or on the street. And
wow. More than 50%?
Yeah. So they're very rich and affluent, and then just if they looked out of their window, there would be people living on the street. And I would drive past these flyovers, and there would be people just sleeping under the flyovers. And one of the things that one time I had, it was really a God moment, and I have lots of God moments in my life, and God spoke to me about serving, the have-nots. And there was once a camp that was organized, and it was one of my cousins who organized it, and she was an older lady. And she says, Kevin, you have all these college kids around you, and they'll bring high energy can they just come and help me at my camp? So I told her, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And can you tell me a little bit about these kids? And then she said, these are kids who live in the brothels. And I didn't quite understand all of that. And my kids had college friends, but they came from affluent Hindu homes. So I was just thinking, how am I going to bridge this and talk to them about who they are going to serve? And because of the caste system, which I'm aware of, and people look down on other people and all of this, so I didn't really know how it's all going to pan out. But I said, okay, we'll do it. So I prepared these kids and I told them, listen, we are going to be serving in this camp. And let me tell you, this is going to be a one-off. Let's just go there. And now I know that, you may never have met children like these. But can we just for that one day, just put aside our own, what we think or anything, but just let's go there and sort of be the hands and feet of Jesus. Now, these are all not Christian, okay? The kids I'm taking there. But they knew I was, and they knew my daughter Sonia was, and they said, yes, uncle, yes, uncle. They, in India, they call the older people uncles. So they said, yes, we'd be happy to do this. And so we went there. And I think that camp changed everything. Not only did those girls get so deeply impacted, they were loving on these kids and hugging them, and they felt such a connect. Kali, this could have never happened in normal circumstances in India. And that was, I'm talking about, it was in 2008. And that meeting led me to start what we call Transformers Club. And I know I've shared this story with you all, and your kids had, collected, whatever
The
you
piggy
give,
bank.
the piggy bank.
Yeah.
And one time I was in your house, and they gave that piggy bank to me, and I was so deeply, touched by that gesture. That this gift would go back to serve those kids who don't have much. And we've never stopped doing that. As much as everything else we do, we've never stopped doing that. And I'm praying for some leaders to come and really take that vision forward, because I think we really represent the heart of God. Jesus said, when I was in prison, you came in. And they said, no, when did we do that? And they said, what you did to the least, you did to me. I think about that. I think about it often. In our nation, in our context. And I want to keep doing that as much as I would train leaders, plant churches, that I'd never forget the poor.
You have the best heart. And seeing some of the stories and photos, as you said, children living in brothels.
Yeah.
It's such a contrast every time we get to hear your stories of the things that we see in America and the things that exist in this whole world that we live in. And I think the more that we get to hear the stories that you have to tell, the more that it puts into context a handful of things, in that it reminds us in some ways that, yes, we have problems, but we also have no problems. And it doesn't take seeing many of those experiences to look one of those kids in the eye, as you've done, to say, wow, that's a life that is a long, long, long ways away from the life that I live. And I just really appreciate the multiple parts of your ministry that is planting churches and is helping grow the faith in a country of 1.45 billion people, where 2.5% are Christians. I love your attitude to say, that just means there's more to harvest. There's more there for us to get. You can only go up. I appreciate that. I can get on board with that. And the fact that you tell that story from a mission standpoint, from a church planting standpoint, I'm just so thankful that you've taken the time to help educate us, help answer our both dumb and very deep questions throughout this time. So we love you, Kevin. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's just been a joy. Thank you so much. And thank you for just standing and supporting all that we do. I know that you make a huge difference, more than you can ever imagine. So I'm deeply grateful
We love
for
you
the
so much.
friendship and the love and your family.
Thank you.